often what we do instead is we teach the topic in isolation and to solve simplified questions, which is all theoretical, and also a lot of assumptions are made, and all for the purpose of examination, right? So there seems to be an obvious gap between what we teach and what the students need to do as a scientist, right? And also there is a problem here with the students is directing most of the time. The students don't decide what question they do, right? So because they just do the tutorial, the worksheet, and the exam question, which is set by the teachers. So this is what we aim to do. We aim to redesign our curriculum to better help our students to behave like a scientist. Right? So we used to do some of this in the past for inquiry lessons using traditional experiments and also using data loggers. However, we do find some limitation in this traditional approach because, first of all, the amount or the types of things that you can analyze is pretty limited. We can't analyze 2D motion. I mean, we can, but it's extremely hard to set up if you have tried it before. And also, non-rigid body, you'll get errors in your graph, which don't make sense. And also, things that actually occurs in a short time, you can't analyze them properly because of human reaction time. However, with the use of high-speed camera, collision between objects, we can freeze that moment between even several objects interacting. So I think that is the true power of Tracker. And also, because it's so easy to set up, we can afford to differentiate. Every student can afford to do a different task. In the traditional approach, it's already very hard to set up one experiment, not to say every student do a different one. It's simply overwhelming. And also, because Tracker is free, that's the most important thing. Because for data logger, it's very expensive. The students have to share, set up, and they can't bring it home. Whereas Tracker, anytime, anywhere. Yeah? As long as they have the computer, they have their cell phone with them, they can take a video and they can analyze. And of course, to help them to analyze high-speed motion, we actually bought some high-speed camera for them to borrow from the lab. And it's very cheap now. We bought a Casio high-speed camera for around 200 euros. Yeah. Okay, so unlike traditional course, we actually focus more on the graphical approach rather than solving by equations and memorizing formulas and all. I mean, we still do that, but that's not our focus. Right, so after defining what is the displacement, velocity, acceleration graph, and briefly introducing them to the graph, we actually asked them to do some flip videos to actually learn how to install the software and how to use the software to do some basic analysis. And after that, the students will learn how to use it and then come to class to actually discuss the graph. Right? Throughout the course, we also implement a lot of other flip videos. Right? This is to save time in class, because time in class should be reserved for activities and discussion. I mean, that's how we see it. So as far as possible, with simple instruction, we will do it offline. Okay, so this is examples of what they are given in class. So the students were given a set of videos at the start. I pre-recorded them because these are very simple videos to get them warmed up for the more difficult tasks and more authentic tasks later. So we will discuss each of these graphs and then present in groups and then critique on each other presentation. So we can see that, for example, here is a card with a gentle push. I basically just put it on the track and then give it a push. And you can see that it slows down, the velocity slows down after a certain time. So this is a graph to show constant deceleration, or you can just slow it down, constant acceleration. And next one is a card going down the slope. Right? Again, it's a very nice graph of a constant speeding up. And next, I show them, actually there's several other videos, these are just the key ones. Right, so then we have the bouncing ball. So the bouncing ball objective is to show them that motion actually occurs in phase. So there's one phase here, second phase here, and then third phase here. So it is not as complex as it seems at the start. This is to convince the students. So this is just a vertical bouncing ball, right, which is I think quite common to be used in Tracker teaching. Okay, then after that, once the students are more confident, we basically give them some tasks as a group to actually try to investigate like scientists, so to define the problems and to construct the explanation eventually. Right, so they're given a track and several marbles and balls, and they can do whatever they want in class. So these are some of the investigation that the students have done, which is quite interesting. Some of them even choose not to use marble, in fact. They just jump around, throw things around, or do whatever crazy things with their whatever they have in class. So you can see here, these are the more common ones. Then what is interesting here, as I brought up earlier, is that not only is tracker being used in kinematics, this same video, exact same video that was used in kinematics, can be used again in dynamics. And what is the strength there is, the students immediately see the link between the two topics, which is not normally done again in the past. Right? So you can see that I asked, so instead of telling them what is a force, I asked the student, why do you think the cut actually speed up at the start? And why do you think the cut actually slow down at the end? So they were able to tell me, oh, okay, during this part, phase A, I call it, the person is pushing the cut. And so during this push, there is a force. Of course, they didn't articulate it until I further probed. So what do you call this term? They were able to come up with the term force. So they said the force was the one that actually caused the motion. And after that, friction was the one that was responsible for slowing down. Then I asked a further question, and then they were able to answer that. They said the force only applied during the push. But this is a very, very common misconception. Students think that object always have a force pushing as long as they're moving. Okay? So in fact there isn't, but this is a very, very common misconception. But with the data, they were able to tell that there is no force, in fact, to cause it to move. In fact, there is only a force to slow it down, not to push it forward. Okay? So that was an interesting discovery. And to teach Newton's second law, I set up this experiment. It's basically a cart linked to a pulley, and I have 3 different carts with different mass. So, and then connected to a pulley. And from there, they were able to deduce F equals ma. Of course, experimental error were there because of the rolling and sliding friction of the wheels, and also friction and other factors. But the math was good enough to convince them that they are actually proportional. Right? So, after they learned the formula F equals ma, we introduced them to the model builder. This is a tool that we just tested out this year. Actually, this project has started 4 years ago, right? But during that time, we were just new to the software, and we didn't really explore the full longitudinal aspect of the software. And this year, we actually tried a little bit of new features. This is new. So we actually found that, oh, okay, from the gradient here, so they can actually use the gradient here. We found that the friction here was about 0.246 the gradient there. And then that was the friction. That was the friction that causes this acceleration. So multiply by the mass of 0.2 kg, and you get a friction. Right? So they could key in this force here into the equation. I think it's learned from the behind. So this is minus 0.246 times m, which is ma. However, you can see that the first part there was another force. So we have to introduce an if statement. It's really not that hard. If t is less than 0.2, which means that if the first part is earlier than 0.2, the force is, again, I do the same thing for the push. And we found the average acceleration was 3.2. So I say 3.2 times m. If t is less than 0.2, 3.2 times m. That's the force of the push. And it is, of course, minus of the friction, the net force we're talking about. So, and then up, comma, negative 0.246 m. So if it's less than 0.2, it's the push. If it's more than that, it's the friction. So this is the green dot. Okay. Actually, it's very close, so it's quite hard to see. The green dot is the one that is generated by the model. And the red dots, which is almost the same. You can see the substitution. Oh, sorry, I think it's the other way around. The green dot is the green one is the actual data. Right, so they actually matches quite well. Once you can see the dot almost intersect. Okay, so this is to show the students that, oh, okay, most of the time, or in fact all the time, the force is the responsible for the motion, not the motion responsible for the force, because we teach in a way it was kinematics first, then dynamics. So they always think that it's kinematics that causes dynamics, not the other way around. Right, so this kind of like solves this confusion. And of course, if it's just doing, the students will not be motivated enough to push themselves. So we actually set 20% aside for the whole year for this assessment. So we want to really, really stretch them into pushing their limits with the software. So I asked them, imagine that in a scenario, they are scientists, and they have to actually analyze a complex motion. And of course, to share this with the scientific community to actually better the scientific community understanding. Right, so, but of course, if I were to set this for the whole class, the weaker students will be suffering. So I actually have this first strand of rubrics, which is to help the weaker student or the less motivated student. Even if you don't do well, you choose to analyze a simple motion, it's okay. You only lose 2 marks out of the 20 marks, right? Which is not too heavily penalized. So students are able to differentiate. If you want to do more, you can. If you choose not to do more, you can do that too. So, and of course, because the class is so hard for some of the students, we actually have consultation session during the lesson and outside the lessons. And then suggestions were made to refine the videos. Sometimes the videos are simply wrong because of the tilt in the perspective or some other errors. And also to give them direction for further readings. And of course to suggest on the analysis if they still have problem with it. Okay, this is what we intend to do but we didn't do, because we just mentioned earlier that modeling is very powerful. So we wanted the students to do it. However, because of the time constraint, we couldn't have enough practice of that, and to grade them on something they don't have to practice is not very fair, so we decided not to grade them on that. But this is a video done by a student, it's rotated. So it's a ball, tennis ball bouncing off the water. So it's a fish tank with water inside, the tennis ball bounces. And this is the motion of it. And you can see the green dots here, and the red dots matches very well. The green dots are the model. So this model was again using the if nested statement. So if less than this time, okay, then wait. And then during this time it was upthrust because the water and then drag force and so on, right? So we could actually match this very well. And if the students are able to do that, we are sure that they have understood the motion. Okay, this is one of the sample reports. Of course, this is not the real report because I have to squeeze into one slide. So this is what the students say. They say we are allowed to use physics to understand the movement around us, and therefore it's relatable. So they are not something we give it to them, but she chose to do this herself. Right? And apart from what we taught, we did a lot of readings on the movement. So I think this is the key point, because we often want students to actually read beyond the text, but we are not very successful in the past. But through this project, somehow they are more willing to read beyond what they are given. Right? And so this is the motion, of course this line she didn't edit, so we can just for that. So she actually analyzed that the downstroke of the bird wings and the upstroke was different. The downstroke was actually higher in the acceleration, therefore more force than the upstroke. Also the upstroke was a shorter time. So this allows the birds to both move higher and also accelerate forward. So that was something which I find very, very interesting. And we did a pre and post survey. So we have a perception survey before and after to see whether the students change their perception about science. So this is, first of all, we asked them questions about how they like physics lessons. So before that, you can see the rating was very high. I actually divided the survey result into all classes and the best class because the results were quite different too. So you can see that the red bar, which is for the best class after that and before that, was really, really different. Whereas for the purple bar, which is for all classes, is slightly better, but not as much as the best class. Right, so you can see that all of them, they really enjoy the lessons. And I must remind everyone that I'm teaching the girls' school, and in the past, I know there's some girls, female scientists definitely, but in my school, in the past, the girls really didn't really like physics so much. So this was a breakthrough for us, I thought. And we also asked them questions based on whether they behave like a scientist. So, like whether you like to do hands-on activity, or do you like the teachers to tell you the answer, or do you prefer to do hands-on activity or to read about them? Right. So, interestingly, for the bulk of the class, the results were negative for the rest, except for the first two strands. However, for the best class, it was positive throughout. So, from this preliminary analysis, we think that, of course, we're not sure we have to do further research and interview the students to find out really what's the reason. But we think that it could be because the better class were able to really learn better, and therefore, they were able to take in wrong data and the negative opinion from others. Whereas the average of the cohort only enjoy doing the activities, but they don't really like people to tell them they are wrong, or they don't want to explore new methods. And when they have normally the data, they get very, very frustrated. Right, so that's what we think. Yeah. So with that, I end off my presentation. You can contact me via the email. This is Mr. Wee. He has a blog with all the applets and video tracker stuff there for the interest if you are interested. Yeah. So any questions?
Well, right, now it's time for your questions, comments. Please.
So I have two questions concerning. One is technique. You see, because sometimes your signal is very noise, a lot of noise.
Yeah, correct.
And this is a problem because you must explain what is noise, how to fight with this, make fitting, and so on. So this is the first question. How do you do it? Because it is not so straightforward to explain what is it. And the second, now what you projected 2 slides ago. Here, no. You see it? No, this was this bar graph.
This one?
Bar graph, the last one.
Oh, the last one. Okay, the last one. Yeah, this one.
Still more.
Yeah.
That's it. You see, look at these first 2 questions.
Yeah.
So in pretest, if I read it, yes. So it dropped the interest in, I prefer to do hands-on activities rather than to read about them.
Yeah, actually,
it increased
before.
It increased slightly.
Yeah,
So, all right.
Only the bottom decrease.
All right, so are you satisfied with the results?
No, definitely not.
Yes.
Yeah, but this is the first time we did more.
I'm asking because it seems to me the differences are quite very little.
Correct.
So it should be larger, so that's my second question. How do you explain it? Maybe the scale, I don't understand what is this.
Oh, okay, yeah. So maybe I should explain a little bit about the scale first. Oh, maybe address your first question first.
As you like, you may answer.
Okay, so for the first question, yeah, noise is definitely a problem, so maybe I choose one that is more problematic.
Here it is not so bad, but then
Yeah, you can see that there's actually a lot of noise here. So I actually explained in class that displacement is what we actually measured from the video. And velocity is actually derived based on this. And because of that, there's some problem. Because it's 3 dots, then we'll use that to calculate 1 dot.
Look, we understand this, but how do you explain it to students? Because you see, we know this is first and second derivative.
Yeah, correct.
But you know, they know about derivative, how the noise increases.
Yeah, so I use layman term to explain derivative. I say 3 dots to get 1 dot here and 3 dots to get 1 dot here. So in this way, I actually explain derivative without using complicated formulas. And I say therefore, whatever error you do in the clicking here will be magnified here, and then again here will be magnified here.
Yes.
So because of that, you get a lot of noise. So I said, okay, first thing you have to use the average value and compare to the gradient. If it matches well, that shows that the trend is good. And however the case, because this has more noise than here, so you should be using the gradient to find the acceleration rather than
it is real world, so the noise is normal.
Yeah.
So okay, thank you. And the second
Okay,
question.
second question.
How are you satisfied with the results?
Yeah, the results were actually more confused than, of course I'm trying to make meaning up because we thought that we had done a good job, but in the end the result was negative for most of the class. Especially the last one was a bit scary because you can see that the score is quite good. Oh, we have a scale of 6. So 3 and 4 is average, so 6 is the highest and 1 was the lowest. So this is rather low. They actually don't like finding things that disagree with their previous ideas. So if they have a misconception in the past, they like to keep their misconception rather than you correcting them. So that is something that we really understand. Yeah, although we have been addressing that in class, but yeah, I think, I don't know, do you have a suggestions on how we can solve this?
Yep.
Yeah, so
just one small question. When you talk about the best class, you mean the best class regarding receptivity, or they already divided into classes of different levels?
Okay. It's because in K9 they are divided into the subject combination. So this is a class which is better in the math and better in the physics.
Okay.
Yeah, in that sense because of the nature of the subject combination.
I was just as a suggestion, it may not work, but have you tried pairing students, like an exemplary student from one of the best sets or in the top of that class, and doing the kind of zone of proximal development, having one help the others up? Because I don't know whether it's just the peer effects they don't want to be told by their fellow students, or whether trying to find ways to get around the problem of getting over misconceptions without being told by the teacher that you're wrong with this. So it's an idea. Have you tried getting someone who's a bit stronger student to help
Okay,
with
that's interesting because so far my pairing is arbitrary according to their seating arrangement, by blocks. Yeah, so yeah, that is something worth trying.